So I just want to tell you all that you're all muted right now, but there will be time for questions and answers at the end of the meeting. We'll use the chat box to ask questions both during the call. If you have something that you want to add to the conversation, use the chat box, or at the very end, you can ask the panelists and Collins to chime in, and everyone else who's on the call. The session is recorded. The presentation will be shared to the listserv and to the website after the call. And then just the standard boilerplate, the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the speakers. So they don't represent what our speakers today say, don't represent legal advice, views, or positions of the PSA and its members or any other entities. So just to reiterate that we will share the materials from today. We're going to be discussing a lot of resources. I'll put the URLs in the chat as we discuss those resources, but we'll also share at the end, after the call is over, we will share with everyone that list of URLs and resources. And any of the panelists, if you bring something up in part of the conversation, I'll just ask you at the end of the day to send me that URL so that we can share them. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Collins to introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Don. I really appreciate you giving us a head start, and thank you to everyone who has been able to log on. I promise this is going to be a great discussion. So I want to reach out to one of the panelists that is already here, and we might be having others having a hard time logging on because we send them a separate link than the rest of you, but we'll get them to you as soon as we possibly can. But first, we'll start with Karen. Karen, do you want to just briefly tell us who you are and what you do? We already can see the information, but I'll just let you speak for yourself. Thank you.
Hey. Yes, thanks, Collins. Well, first, I want to congratulate 67th webinar. Wow. Little cheers for that. Happy to be here. Happy to see other colleagues and friends on the call. Again, my name is Karen Ullman. I am the Assistant Program Manager at the Produce Safety Program at the Washington State Department of Agriculture. So I'm based in the greater Seattle area, but I work statewide really with all produce growers in the state to try to understand the FSMA produce safety rule. So the Produce Safety Program was developed as a result of FSMA and also is funded fully by FDA. But in previous work life at the Department of Ag, I have done other education on GAP, on FSMA, different trainings, including the Produce Safety Alliance, which I'm a lead trainer of. But really, it's been my mission to try to help growers of all sizes understand good agricultural practices and what to do with safe handling on the farm. And I've tried a variety of different techniques over the years to reach different audiences, which I'll be happy to speak to later.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing that. I'm seeing another one who has just popped up, and that is Annalisa. Annalisa, do you mind going ahead and introducing yourself? I really do not want to introduce people when they can speak for themselves and their special extension specialists. So please go right ahead.
No problem. Thank you so much, Collins, and thanks to PSA for hosting this today. My name is Annalisa Hultberg, and I'm an extension educator in food safety at the University of Minnesota. So I lead extensions efforts in the education around the FSMA produce safety rule. I'm a lead trainer for that, and I kind of coordinate our great team here that includes a number of farmer trainers as well, and work closely with our Minnesota Department of Agriculture to lead those trainings around the state. But prior to that, I was doing GAP education since about 2011 at the University of Minnesota, educating our growers around the principles of food safety, getting a GAP audit if that's appropriate, and now the FSMA produce safety rule. So in Minnesota, we are lucky to have a lot of diversity. I think we're going to get into that today, but just to kind of get you an idea, it is cold up here. Our climate is difficult to grow produce in, but we are a hardy bunch. We have roughly 3,000 produce farms, give or take, as per NASS data. And there definitely might be more than that. We tend to be a little bit smaller, diversified, more likely to have, say, livestock on the farm or row crops or other kind of commodities grown on the farm. And we also have a lot of diversity in terms of ethnicity, a number of immigrant minority growers, Hmong American growers, a number of African immigrant growers, Spanish-speaking growers. We really have a lot of diversity and just a really burgeoning local food scene, primarily direct to consumer. So don't have a big history of gap audits and don't have that many covered farms, roughly maybe 75 to 100 covered farms only. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale of our farms. At the same time, they sell a lot of produce. We have over 375 farmers markets in the state. So there's a lot of produce moving from a lot of farms. It's just not necessarily hasn't gone through a gap audit and is not necessarily coming from covered farms.
Thank you, Annalisa. I really appreciate that. Julian, will you go ahead and unmute yourself and then turn on your video so that people can know who you are? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Collins. My name is Julian Kroboth. I work for an organization in Washington, D.C. called Fresh Farm that manages farmers markets in the area, about 25 to 30. And I manage a program in the organization that does wholesale aggregation and distribution, where we're working directly with those farmers. So in a given year, I'm working with anywhere from 20 to 30 farms directly purchasing. And the farmers that I work with, their approach generally in terms of the farmers market is there's no like certifications that they need to set up at the farmers market. But as I have farms reaching out to me and looking to expand their revenue streams and looking to tap into new markets, one thing that I'm telling them is that getting GAP certified is a big step towards expanding and unlocking more potential customers that you're looking for.
Good. Thank you, Julian. Thank you so much. And we shall appreciate the perspectives you're going to bring to this discussion. And now I'll go to our own Laura. She's around and most people know her, but I would like to introduce herself as well. You have to unmute yourself.
My name is Laura Acuña Maldonado, and I'm one of the Produce Safety Alliance Spanish Language Extension Associates. I've also worked with the National GAPS program at Cornell University. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, but not the least, we shall have Alicia to introduce herself. Please, Alicia, go right ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annalisa Chaverest. I'm the Assistant Director at Alabama A&M University Small Farms Research Center. We're located in Normal, Alabama. That's Huntsville, Alabama. The campus is on Normal, Alabama. Our target audience is historically underserved, socially disadvantaged, limited resource farmers, veterans, new and beginning farmers. So we pretty much our program is catered to minority farmers. We cover the entire state. We also focus on food safety, but my role here is a little bit different. Not only do we focus on food safety, we focus on air property, estate planning, risk management strategies, as well as access to capital and resources for farmers and landowners. That is throughout the state of Alabama. And finally, we actually cross quite a few borders. We work with most of the southern states. We work very closely in Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So we want to start the discussion by soliciting participation of everybody that is here. And to do that, we have a question, and the question is going to be popped in the chart and is asking what barriers remain to participation in the PSA grower training. It's Mentimeter, and I'll be putting that in the chart so that everybody can tell us exactly what they think is, one of the biggest barriers that they are facing in having to participate in the PSA grower training. Please, if you can go ahead and open that, you can use 3 responses or 1, but you want to see the responses coming in, and as they come in, we shall just go ahead and start with our panelists. But for now, I want to see what you think. What are the barriers as trainers? Do you think are pertinent to why people are not participating in PSA training, or even when you are conducting those trainings, what are those barriers that you're facing? And yes, the link is there in the chat. Please go ahead and tell us. And but in the meanwhile, as we get those responses, I want us to go right ahead into the discussion. So please keep the discussions going. And on the Mentimeter, the link that I shared, I'll be sharing my screen later in the discussion. But for now, I have a few questions for our panelists. And the first question that I'll be going for is whether they actually feel that they have reached everyone that is or that needs the required training of PSA. Do you think that actually you have reached everybody? I'll start with Karen, and then we shall go through the rest of the audience.
Sure. Yeah, so in addition to being as an educator in my position at Department of Ag, we also are doing inspections on the field. So we get to see both the side of conducting the PSA trainings in coordination with other partners in the state, and then we're also kind of seeing what the reality is on site in terms of level of food safety knowledge and culture that's built up and that is implemented in certain field in certain operations. And while we did think we had a pretty good saturation of PSA attendance, we're still seeing demand for the training. And we're noticing a couple things, at least in the field, that we still have covered farms, large covered farms that don't have a person on site that's been through the training. I think one piece of that is maybe just farms not knowing maybe the difference between other food safety trainings and the PSA specific training that they're going through, maybe just not knowing the nuanced difference between those two things, which I could imagine could be the reality for some farms when they're not only having to comply with this regulation, but other L&I, other requirements and certifications. So I could see how that line could be blurry for someone that's new to this, or think they may have been through the training, but it's not the specific training that we're looking for. Another item is that we are being more stringent about the fact, and especially now that we're actually having more enforcement with our compliance, we're writing down observations. It's becoming more real for the farms. It's not just educational when we're on site during inspections. And we've been more strict in terms of having an on-site responsible party who has been through the PSA training. So it wouldn't be satisfactory for us for there to be a singular consultant that's working with multiple farms that isn't on site on a daily basis to be the responsible party for that regulatory requirement. So that, I think, has in turn spiked more interest in making sure more of the orchard level managers or other management level parties are involved in getting the training. So we're still seeing a demand for the training across a couple of different industries and a couple of different grower types as well. So those are some of the things that we've been observing so far.
That's good. Thank you so much. We appreciate that perspective coming from a regulator and a trainer. Now I'll change my post and go to Annalisa in Minnesota. What do you think? Have you reached everyone that deserves to take or is supposed to be taking the PSA grower training?
Well, my colleagues at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture that actually conduct the inspections, I believe that they would say that the majority of farms that they conduct inspections on have sent somebody. However, there are a few that haven't. And I would say maybe more importantly, there's always new farms coming online that are covered farms. For example, we have a really burgeoning farm to school program. And I know a lot of states do. There's a lot of monies coming down through the USDA, the local food purchasing agreement, and other farm to school money that has allowed a lot of farms to start selling to distributors who then sell to schools or perhaps directly to schools. And in many cases, these might not be a qualified end user and therefore might put this farm into a covered farm category in ways that they previously weren't. So it could be a pretty small farm, but when they start selling, food hubs is another example. We have a lot of food hubs that are coming up. We have farm incubator programs. These are wonderful programs, but I frankly spend a lot of time working with these folks in addition to farms themselves, because it's really important for these people to know that these increased purchases that they're making from farms, which is great, but it might have an impact on their status. So even if the majority of those that are being inspected currently have attended a training, there's still so many more coming online. I think that we're just getting started.
That's good. That's good to hear from Annalisa, and that is true for most other people out there. But let me just go to the South. Alicia, tell us a little bit with your outreach. Do you think that people have taken this required PSA grower training?
Yes, I do believe that it still is not reaching certain target audiences, particularly socially disadvantaged and limited resource farmers. And I'll just give an example. We just held a training, a growers training on last week in Biloxi, Mississippi, and we had 40 trainers, 40 farmers that needed to be trained. And a lot of the farmers, I listening to the discussion, most of them was having to differentiate the difference between GAP certification and PSA training. They assumed that it was basically the same. And most of them was asking questions, so what's the difference? And this person didn't come, this auditor didn't come to my residence and, audit my farm and things of that nature. So it's still that fuzzy line of the difference between a PSA training and GAP certification. So you even having to go back and explain those details, that there is a big difference actually. And I think another barrier that I would say is funding. I think we have gotten lucky to have trained farmers to actually to more or less defray their costs, whereas some organizations, they charge a hefty fee, and most people are not able to pay that fee, as well as be so far away from home, then pay that fee, the hotel fee, and all those other fees that come along with traveling. So you have those little hiccups here and there that can make it very challenging for someone that want to take the training and to gather more information on exactly what is PSA. So that's what we kind of found out in the South. It's still a lot of training to do, but at the same time, I do believe it will happen in due time. It will happen in due time. Yeah.
Thank you. It's good to be optimistic. And now this is going to be a whole different question for Julian. Julian, what are you hearing in the markets, in the population that you serve? Do they have this PSA certification, the people that you're serving?
Yeah, so like I said, the farms that I work with that are their businesses are based strictly around the farmers market are not nearly as, they don't feel nearly as incentivized to go through these trainings as farms that are, like someone else said, trying to expand into markets where the end user is going to require some sort of food safety, good agricultural practices, some sort of certification from the farm. And so there's definitely a delineation between farms that are interested or feel like motivated to go do these trainings, and farms that just absolutely do not prioritize it in the least. I do think that something that I feel like would definitely help would be kind of targeting areas like, just looking on the website for the upcoming PSA trainings. Like, I see a lot, and I work in the Mid-Atlantic, so like I see a lot in Pennsylvania, but I don't see any in Virginia. And so like, it seems like it would be logistically pretty easy for a farmer in Pennsylvania to attend one of these trainings because there's a lot of them scattered throughout the winter months. But if you're a farmer in Virginia, it's like the closest one to you is either Charleston, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, or North Carolina. And so, that's definitely an additional barrier to entry for those farmers.
Well, thank you so much. You must have answered one of the questions that I was going to ask in a few in a few minutes as we go ahead. But I want to specifically ask Karen and Alicia. I want to know how actually have you navigated serving minority communities, and what approaches have you actually used to attract them to the grower trainings? In line to what you just shared with us, we already know that there are some gaps, but how have you specifically attracted these minority growers, Black communities, the Hispanic growers in the different communities that you're serving?
Yeah, I could take a first stab at this. So one thing we have been doing for many years now is partnerships are really, really essential to us, number one, and that's been a huge support system for us in reaching the broad area that we do have as the Department of Ag, trying to reach all different parts of the state with lots of different crops, lots of different size of farms, etc., lots of diversity in general. So partnerships are huge. One example of a partnership is working with our tree fruit association to deliver, we do at least 2 Spanish trainings every year. And that's been really, really critical for us to serving that population. But certainly there's lots of other additional underserved populations. So working with, we've worked with a wide variety of different organizations over the years. Recently, we did a Train the Trainer with LULAC Grows in Southwest Washington. And their hope is to expand and provide more services for the Hispanic populations that they have down there. So that's been really critical to us. Another thing that's also driven some demand as well for some of the organizations that do work with different communities is that for some of the food hubs, like Annalisa was mentioning, we also have a lot of cooperative partnerships that are working together on aggregate distribution, marketing, maybe trying to break into wholesale markets or helping direct growers have more of an online presence to be able to sell to different customers. Some of those organizations have actually, in order to be involved in their organization and receive some of the benefits of that group collaboration, they've required the PSA training, or they've required a PSA training or a food safety plan. So that's been a useful incentive for encouraging them to attend our trainings. And then also, to the extent they're interested, we're always very willing to help train up new trainers within those organizations. We see that as a key outreach method. That's part of why we did the Train the Trainer with LULAC Grows last year. So that's been a really interesting outcome. And even at the state, some of the pandemic funding, for example, enabled us to do more food purchasing, and we actually wrote into some of our purchasing policies more standards around food safety requirements. So we partnered with lots of different programs within the state to establish what those criteria would be to look for making sure that people have some level of food safety understanding. And we created some similar options where it's a combination of PSA training or something equivalent, so that we can kind of help ensure that there is some general knowledge without making those contracts limiting to different populations. So those are some of the strategies that we've been using more recently.
Well, I echo some of the things Karen has said particularly about the partnerships. I think that's kind of crucial. I think that's one of the things that we kind of been successful with, establishing partnerships not only with the cooperative extension systems, not only with universities, but community leaders, going into with farmers markets and talking to them and having them taking the PSA course and let them see the importance of having the course and letting their farmers know about the course. We have also partnered with minority-driven organizations that specifically are in the community and working from the ground up. We felt that that has been vital because they're pushing the program more than we are pushing the program. They're sharing their knowledge and sharing what they learned, sharing the information, even just to get the word about us, Alabama A&M Small Farms Research Center, as well as the PSA training itself. At the end of the day, we have incorporated hands-on training to kind of work side by side with this manual and with this training, whether it's a standalone or even with the actual training, that has kind of been helpful to actually see it put to use. Showing attending community organization meetings and just talking about, hey, have you taken the PSA training? Let me give you a snippet of why you should take it. And here's some training. And here's a farm field day we're having what's coming up. So you're taking all of these approaches not only to show them that it's needed, that everything can be implemented, and even showing the connections with the state, including Department of Agriculture, at most of our trainings, and more or less bridging that gap and making that relationship very relaxed. And I think sometimes when you think about training and certification, and eventually somebody coming on your property to audit, a lot of farmers kind of get uptight about that. So we bring in these USDA, we bring in the Department of Agriculture so they can interact with them on the ground level versus it being so formal and they going in their office and the first time they're seeing this person is actually on their farm operation. So we kind of just been incorporating all those little snippets to kind of make sure that it's a very relaxed environment, as well as they get the information is needed and it's easily distributed.
Thank you, Alicia and Karen, for giving us those tips. And I know we have a lot of other trainers online listening in who are serving minority communities. I hope you can pick one or two of the approaches. But one of the things that I cannot overemphasize is the importance of partnerships. Really important. And as you know, PSA really thrives on that as well. Now, just going into another discussion, this one is going to be open to everybody on this panel. Is what do you think might be actually keeping people from attending these PSA grower trainings, or even any other food safety training for that matter? What would be one reason you think, in your own opinion? Pretty open, anybody can discuss. And in the meantime, I'll be sharing the results from the main team mirror, because actually I think some of those might answer the question I just asked. But as you can see, really, can people see the screen I'm sharing? Yeah, but really things like language, time, cost awareness, lack of motivation really seem to be taking a lead. And I think that could be one of the reasons that some of the panelists we are going to talk about, but the floor is too open. If anybody wants to chime in, even if it is in a chart, by the way, the chat is open. You can just tell us what you think is actually one of the reasons some people might not be wanting to participate in the trainings.
Well, I would just say time, especially, given the number of priorities that a small farm, so the farms that we work with in Minnesota don't have a food safety manager who's dedicated, who that is their job. I mean, they have many, many jobs. So this is one small percent of their time, and they're doing a really good job with it. But, we have a really insignificant insects and disease pressures, for example. So labor issues, this is one priority. And in Minnesota's case, they aren't being asked about food safety from buyers traditionally. So that's starting to change as I'm starting to work, we're all starting to work with the food hubs and others saying, this is a great way to leverage these purchases and say, hey, also, could we ask for something like a food safety plan and a site visit? And that can work, or attend a food safety training, or attend the PSA training. But then that buyer has to agree to that, and they might not have the capacity to go out and do that food safety visit. But they're also not able to necessarily ask for a gap audit because we don't have that. We only have about 12 vegetable farms, diversified vegetable farms in the state that do have a USDA gap audit. And there's probably others that have other labels, but the majority don't, and they haven't been asked in the past. So if you haven't been asked to do something, maybe you learn about it a little bit, but you haven't necessarily taken those steps to make a plan and to really make some significant changes simply because it's fallen down the priority list, would be my take on it. But I do see that changing.
Oh, thank you so much. And in line with that, I think it would also be beneficial if one of the panelists, or two or three, would share with us some of the most innovative ways you have employed, so that you get people to take our standardized curriculum. Are there some of the approaches, that are unique or that are innovative that you have used to get people to attend our course? It's still open, please. I want people to know about it.
I would say one of the most interesting approaches or innovative approaches we used was actually working with the American Community Garden Association and incorporating, like within these big conferences, incorporating a PSA training within their conference, like a pre-conference. And that worked actually very well to get folks, if they never heard about it, you in that space, you in that community, to kind of get people talking. And another kind of innovative idea was we had a farm tour, and it was actually for the people that had already taken the PSA training and maybe needed to brush up on kind of recourse, kind of get them started back if they kind of wanted some more information, but actually had a hands-on training where we went through pretty much all the modules, but you had somebody talking specifically about soil, but now we're in the field actually hands-on applying what your soil should look like. We had someone talking about the cleaning and workers' health and hygiene and that particular module, and kind of going through all the cleaning products that can be used and so forth. So kind of having those field trainings versus kind of being stuck in the classroom with that hefty PSA manual, and actually allowing them to apply it. Because at the end of the day, if they get the information and they still don't know how to apply it, that always is the problem. They got to use it. So finding innovative ways, like having a farm tour and actually seeing how they will apply it, what it looks like in the actual field for us.
Yeah, people like to learn from touching and, hands-on activities. So I agree with you. That is super innovative. Anybody else who has used some other approach that is unique? I know you people are using a lot of innovative ways. That I know.
I'll just mention employing farmers as trainers. So I think this can really make your good training great, because farmers are excellent at talking about how to do these things. So we use especially crop funds and our cooperative agreement funds and other funds to pay our farmers as trainers, pay for their time, and they come to prep sessions and we really work with them. At this point, they don't need much prep because they're pros, but they've kind of taken on, everyone's really good at 2 to 4 modules, and they come in and they really shine at those. And I think the participants really appreciate that. I know the evaluations bear that out. They say, yeah, you extension and regulators are great, but the farmers really gave us the approaches about how to actually implement this, exactly like Alicia was saying, the how to, and over they tell us, yeah, we get it, we believe you, but like it's the how to, where the rubber hits the road is kind of like that next step. When I get home, what specific changes do I need to make? What things do I need to buy? Where do I get that Sanidate 5.0? It's one thing to tell me to use Sanidate, but if I can't get it at Walmart, what do I do? So like really trying to reduce those barriers so that when they get home and they want to make those changes, how do I build a hand washing stand? Where do I buy the specific components? The farmer trainers are excellent at doing that. So if you can do that, I would.
Good. Thank you so
One,
much.
one last thing, always include resources for the farmer, because if they're going to implement these food safety practices, it helps to say, hey, contact the Alabama Department of Agriculture or your Department of Ag. They have this particular resources available, or USDA, NEFA, or SARE. So actually including resources. So if they're not able to afford it or they have limited resources, you're saying, okay, you have went through the training, and if cost and funding is an issue, here's some resources that you can tap into.
Thank you. That's good to know, Alicia. Now, I want to ask one more last question before we delve into other important things of our discussion, especially for those who are reaching out to underserved communities. We want to know, the audience wants to know, what are some of the challenges you're facing in reaching out to them? Yes, we know outreach is different for everyone, but specifically for the underrepresented communities, what are these challenges and how? We already talked about how they are going to be navigated, and I'll ask some of the specific people here, like Annalisa, to tell us how they have navigated serving some people in Minnesota. But for now, what are those challenges? Another open question. Elisa can take a stab, Karen can take a stab at it, but hey, pretty open.
I think part of it is, I work on our inventory efforts, trying to understand the number of farms we have in the state, and really needing to utilize a lot of different avenues to try to understand where the farms are growing and where they're located and contact information. So that's a big effort that we do in terms of our outreach, trying to figure out where those maybe new farms are, or the farms that have maybe their coverage status has gone from qualified exempt to cover, trying to figure out where those are, because if we can identify that that growth, that might be a way we can utilize their growth as an incentive to get more involved than maybe they've had in the past. So knowing that farms change and evolve, and maybe experimenting with different products. So trying to continue to build those relationships with growers, again, working with other organizations is really critical. And we try to have kind of all staff on deck to be looking for new growers, looking at different ways we can build out our inventory, utilizing different like agritourism maps, or utilizing our farmers market organizations. Of course, several folks have mentioned farmers markets here previously.
So Karen, if I'm not stopping you in the middle of your answer, I also know that Washington actually reaches out to Spanish-speaking communities, and that's really where my question was. And I know that Jack Gordon leads those efforts, and we have trainings for these specific communities. So I want to know, if somebody else is serving these Spanish-speaking communities, what are some of the challenges they are facing? And then Alicia would also answer that for Black farmers in Alabama. If you can really nail that and bring it home, because I know many of our face these challenges, that would really, really be important. Thank you. Sorry for cutting you short again. Yeah. Alicia, do you have anything to say on some of these challenges that you're facing in reaching to underrepresented farmers?
I would say one of the challenges that we are having is if you're having a minority community, you want minority trainers. You want a nice balance of minority trainers that's actually in the community training other minority farmers and community leaders. So there's not a lot of minority trainers, and we are working with community leaders to kind of pull them in to be their community leader and training individuals on the PSA training. But what I also find within the community within itself, there are illiterate issues that you have to make sure that you not speaking over farmers' head and using some lingo that as a scientist or a person that's in academia, I know, but making it more in layman's terms for that farmer to understand. My concept is, if they don't ask questions, you got a problem if you're a trainer. because farmers love to talk and they love to ask questions, but once they stop asking questions and they looking at you, it's a problem. And you have to make sure that the words you use, the term you use, it means the same thing to them. It means the same thing to them in their community. So that's another issue or another barrier. Going back to funding, I always say sometimes we already know time is money and money is time. So if we're not able to kind of help them defray that cost to get them to those meetings, that can be a challenge too, because a lot of times folks are not able to attend because how they're gonna get there, the gas money, hotel, things of that nature. So you kind of looking at all those challenges that kind of hit you in the face before you know it, to see how you can navigate. Let me say that, how you can navigate. And I would say that the best thing as a trainer to make sure that you have funds to actually support these communities or resources or partnerships that you can work with to kind of leverage the program, because it does require a lot of leveraging if you're going to execute the program successfully. It does require a little bit more have a little bit more strategies and being very strategic in how you manage the program for underserved communities.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for those insights into that. Now, we have one of the panelists who has actually used one of the resources that PSA provides, and that is Annalisa. We want her to just highlight a little bit of how she was able to use the alternative language to actually train the Hmong farmers in Minnesota. How was it? How was the delivery? If somebody else wanted to use it, how can they do that? Annalisa, please.
Sure, yeah, great. And it's a great tie into what Alicia was just saying. So we work in partnership with a number of organizations along with the Department of Agriculture. And in 2021, one of those organizations, the Hmong American Farmers Association, approached us and said, we would like to get some of our staff trained up as trainers, and we would like to co-host along with you a PSA grower training for some of our participants. So it also goes to what we were saying previously about sometimes it takes an organization outside of either the Department of Agriculture or Extension saying, this is basically a requirement of participation in our program and or buying from you. They're also a food hub, HAFA is, so they also purchase from the farmers that are participating in their educational programs. And they're land-based, they have land there that the farmers rent from them. So these farmers have been part of food safety trainings for years, voluntary gap trainings that we've done in conjunction with them, but they wanted the PSA training and they wanted it in Hmong. So I knew PSA had this alternate language policy in development, and I said, let's pilot it here in Minnesota. So we worked alongside HAFA and the Department of Ag and Extension and our farmer trainers. We had a farmer trainer from outside of HAFA also in as well. So we hosted it on Zoom because this was April of 2021 and we weren't doing in-person trainings. So unfortunately, I would suggest doing it in person if possible going forward, but it did work in the remote setting. It's just, you know, like we were saying, the hands-on components really make for a great training. I love doing the activities, the passing around the poop pillows, all the things that we've developed over the years that really build engagement, the chatting over lunch kind of things. But these folks all knew each other. I will say that recruitment was easier because HAFA took care of it. So going forward, if you're an organization that's going to be hosting a training, using this policy and delivering it in a language where we don't have the translated manual, you can do that. But it would be excellent if you can really have both a farmer and a farmer trainer just kind of working together. So what we did was we had it, and I was the lead trainer, and I was in a different room. I was in another Zoom room, and it was translated to me. And because when they were speaking in Hmong, I needed to hear what they were saying. And if I had a question, I would stop them. And then when the English farmer was presenting, that didn't need to be translated to me. It took about twice as much time. But it worked really well. The evaluation also had to be translated, because we needed to translate the evaluation. I will say we just changed everything. The evaluation looked different, and that was okay. We passed that through PSA. So I would say reach out to your PSA folks if you want to host this and work together, and definitely leave enough lead time. We also had to work with the interpreters ahead of time to make sure they knew all of the concepts really well. So they had a vocabulary list that they developed so that it was pretty seamless on the day of. But the participants loved it. They had a great time. They really thanked us profusely. Thanks for making this training that we thought was kind of out of our reach available to us. So I think it's on us to make it available to anyone who wants it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Now, I have two important questions for two specific individuals, but the first one I'm going for is for Julian, and then it will close with Laura, our own Laura. Now, the first one for Julian. So as someone who is working, to help farmers access markets, please, how have you navigated produce safety issues? And how do you envision PSA, helping to close these gaps? And then the last question after you, it's going to be for Laura to tell us what resources, what things are available from PSA that are going to be helping the trainers to navigate all the issues that people have already mentioned about. We start with Julian and then conclude with Laura. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Collins. So in terms of like how I personally navigate produce safety issues in my job, for the most part, our program sort of views itself as an extension of the farmers market. And so our focus on the farm's produce safety is not as strict, but just sort of anecdotally, and I liked what I think Annalisa mentioned about, like, it's really helpful to have a farmer running these trainings if possible, just because, I feel like the main way, the best way to get through to these farmers that this stuff is important is by framing it in terms of like risk assessment and mitigation and reduction. And so, like, just anecdotally, I work with probably 10 to 12 orchards a year. And so over the last 5-6 years, I've seen like rodent damage from more than one farm. And it's like, part of it is you're lucky that I'm the one who caught this and not someone else, because we can address it internally and I'll trust in you to make those adjustments. But yeah, that's why I say, like, when farmers reach out to me and they're curious about trying to expand their revenue streams, it's like that's a roadblock to you being able to access the entirety of the potential customer base that you're looking to tap into. So, for me, I think like the two biggest barriers are the geographic proximity and the scheduling. And I agree with what Annalisa said about, I really think the in-person is the best way to go, because you don't want it to just be something where the farmers feel like they're checking a box off. You really want to have them absorb as much of that information as possible. And I do feel like in-person is the best way to make that happen. Scheduling wise, like for the farmers that I work with, April through November, their main focus is their farmers markets. And it's really hard to get them off the farm for anything, especially a full day of training during the week. But usually for most of them, after Thanksgiving, at least, they don't have any farmers markets during the week. They may still have a weekend farmers market, but their scheduling flexibility opens up significantly. And so, maybe trying to schedule these trainings so that they're heavier on the in-person emphasis during the winter months, and you have more maybe virtual opportunities in the quote unquote main season, to try and, like I said, I still think that the in-person is the best way to go, but at least having that option for virtual, and maybe trying to push that during the season just to get a little more a little more interest on the farmer side, because, understandably, it's a it's a big ask to try and get them off the farm for basically a full day to do that training. But I think if they can, a lot of these farmers have like an admin day during the week where they can try and catch up on all their back end stuff. So maybe trying to capitalize on something like that would be, a motivating way to do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now that where actually Laura comes in, tell us what is available in terms of what PSA has done to facilitate these trainings and stuff. Thank you.
Yes, Collins, PSA, well, is committed to provide resources that facilitate availability, accessibility to trainers and participants. So I would like to share links to those PSA resources that are relevant to this discussion, starting with the remote grower training delivery policy. As you know, in May this year, the PSA remote delivery policy was made permanent, and it includes detailed requirements that must be followed if the PSA grower training course is delivered remotely. And Collins here led the efforts to analyze data based on a comparison of courses delivered in person and remotely. And the results of this analysis is a fact sheet that highlights the lessons learned and best practices for remote delivery. And the fact sheet was completed just this morning, so you are the first ones to know about it. Also, Annalisa touched on this as well. She actually detailed the use of the alternative language delivery policy, so I'm not going to explain too much about it, but this policy allows trainers, lead trainers, and TOTS to use the policy when registering and delivering PSA courses, and provides greater flexibility in delivering these courses in languages other than those for which an official translation of the grower training course is available. I also would like to highlight the More Than Words Produce Safety illustrations. This project came about in collaboration with the local food safety collaborative to use illustrations that can provide a powerful and effective way to communicate key food safety concepts without the use of text. So Annie Matzik, she is an illustrator, and she did a wonderful job. You probably might seen her work in that children's magazine highlights. So you'll see some similarities in the illustrations. And these are not just for limited literacy growers. Growers that speak languages where there is no translation of the PSA grower training manual can also benefit from them, as well as visual learners, enhancing their learning experience to visualize food safety concepts. There are 21 illustrations on topics about worker training, cleaning and sanitizing, and post-harvest practices, and they are intended to supplement the PSA grower training course and can be used to promote interaction and discussion. And an important part of the illustrations is the teaching notes, which are like the user guide. They include supporting resources, key teaching points. They include relevant FSMA produce safety rule references, and they also give you suggestions on where to introduce the illustration when you're teaching the course. Also, I want to mention quickly the fruit and vegetable food safety training video for field employees. This is available in English, Spanish, Creole, and Hmong. This is a 20 to 27-minute video, depending on the language you choose. Since it's available in those 4 languages, it was developed to support fresh produce growers as they implement employee training to reduce risks during fruit and vegetable production. But it's especially focused on field employees who harvest and pack fresh produce. Also, we have a new podcast series in Spanish called ¿Qué vaina con la inocuidad? What's up with food safety? And this project was led by Davis, Mariana, and Julie here, and supported by the local food safety collaborative. It aims to expand produce safety understanding and promote food safety culture in farms and packing houses for Latino and Hispanic farmers. The podcast consists of 6 interviews with experts in the field, where they answer questions to common issues about food safety on the farm. So I would like to invite our bilingual or Spanish language audience to tune into our first episode titled Training New Hires in Food Safety. There you are going to hear about strategies that can be implemented to carry out effective trainings for farm workers, despite all the challenges of cultural diversity, education levels, and high turnover. And there's going to be new episodes released each week, so stay tuned. And finally, I want to mention that the PSA has completed the Spanish translation of the preamble to the FISMA Produce Safety Rule. So the translation was just delivered to FDA. So it's going to be a great resource for all of our Spanish speaking trainers. Thank you, Collins.
Thank you so very much. Now I'll hand it over back to Dawn and I guess Betsy to close us out. Thank you so much, everyone, for being attentive to this. And if there are any questions, I think we can have them maybe. But hey, Betsy, it's now.
Hi there. I really want to thank all of the presenters that were with us today. It was a really good conversation, and I hope everyone got a lot out of it. I also want to thank all of you for joining us. Please let us know what other topics you would like us to cover as we move forward. And you can see the email here, psatrainers@cornell.edu. So we'll go to the next slide. This is the PSA team, cannot say enough about this group of people and appreciate all of them and appreciate all the work they do to keep materials coming out and to keep interactions going. As Annalisa mentioned in her comments, if you want to do an alternative language delivery, let us know. We can help you with that and we can work through any of the challenges you might have. Next slide, please. So the next educators call is going to be in 2024. So for all of you still online here, this is the last PSA educators call of 2023. Woo-hoo. And we'll be moving into 2024. As a reminder, PSA funding is scheduled to run out in June of 2024. We are working on securing additional funding, but the issue is with Congress and the current FDA budget, there is a real possibility that PSA will come to an end in June of 2024. And if that's the case, we are planning for all contingencies and we'll keep you informed. And if we're not successful at getting funding, we do have a plan to close down in an organized fashion. And it will require us to modify some priorities so that we have everything tied up by the end of funding. We will be transparent about that, and we will, again, keep you in the loop as we move forward. We'll have educators calls that focus on where things are going so that you know. Next slide. Laura Acuna just went through all of these, so I'm not going to hang on them other than to tell you that the second podcast in the series will post today. So that will be number 2. I know she talked about number 1, so that'll be number 2. But all the rest of these she already covered. So we're running late on time, so I'm not going to go over them again. Lastly, you can always find us at the PSA website, both in English and Spanish, seen here. And if you move forward, you can see us on social media or join us in Facebook or we have Facebook, we have newsletters, we have Instagram, and we're actually talking about possibly LinkedIn. That was a discussion this morning. We also have the videos that Laura mentioned on YouTube and lots of interesting things where you can always interact with us. And with that, I do want to just thank everyone. I want to thank Collins and Don for really organizing this. Again, thanks to all the panelists who took the time to join us today. It really was a great conversation, and we always appreciate our external partners and collaborations and all of the really unique and valuable things you all bring to the PSA. So thank you. Collins, I'm turning it back over to you if there's anything you want to say.
Thank you. It didn't look like we had questions in the chat, so we are good to go, and I hope everybody is powered and fired to go and keep doing the trainings. Thank you.
Thank you.